I am thrilled to bring on the show today Dr. Anu Arasu, founder of London Bioidentical Hormones. She has always recognized the uniqueness of her patients and she cares and finds exactly what is right for that individual at the right time, which is such a breath of fresh air. Honestly, we're so honored to have your time and your wisdom with our community today. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Oh, we're thrilled, and we're going to dive into some deep hard questions for you today. But before we do that, let's start with the fun stuff and just how your medical background has brought you to where you are today with holistic medicine, with hormone treatment. So I'll shush, hand over the mic, and give us your journey.
Wow. Well, I don't know how you found it, but when you embark on this journey, one thing leads to another. And I find myself here today speaking with you about so many bigger things. What is life? What is hormones? Where do they intersect? And I think the fascinating thing is we can't really separate these things. And I think today we're going to probably talk quite widely about a number of things, how our biology affects our life and vice versa. And for me, I love that because it's real.
Yes, it is real and it's timely. So thank you. This introduction for some of our listeners, and for others, it's just another opportunity to keep taking that deeper dive and digging into something, another aspect of health that can really be helping them thrive, not just survive through their days. So I think a fun area to start is about our biology. And I love to talk behavior. So I'm curious, can you just start us out with how do those two things even come up in the same sentence?
Well, biology is actually the greatest technology ever invented. And I think that we like to imagine that we are these logical beings that sometimes feel things. And the reality is that we are these emotional beings that occasionally think. And
So,
and I think it's such an interesting way when we look at our behaviors, when we look at the gap between what we intend to do and what we end up doing, and what accounts for that gap, it really, really is quite fascinating. And I think our biology holds a lot of the answers. And just to give you an idea of what a powerful economic force our biology can be, I start with a very famous study. It's called the Stripper Study. It was done by Miller et al. In 2007. And it was looking at the effects of strippers' earnings during their menstrual cycle. And what it found was that during the time that they were ovulating, their hourly earning rate was $70 an hour. And during the time that they were menstruating, that they were bleeding, their hourly earning rate was $35 an hour. It's double the amount during ovulation. This is that can be the power of hormones. It's crazy. And so interestingly, those who were taking the contraceptive pill actually didn't get this peak and trough. They had kind of a flat line. And overall, the earnings were less than anyone that was having a cycle up and down. And to turn that the other way and then look at men's hormones, there was a very interesting study kind of around the same time in 2008 by Apicella et al. And that looked at testosterone levels in men, looked at 98 men and their testosterone levels, their salivary testosterone levels, and it found an association with the higher their testosterone, the more willing they were to take financial risks. And along with that research, there was another paper by Coates and Herbert that looked at 17 traders, okay? And it looked at these traders and it measured their testosterone levels and correlated higher testosterone levels with higher profit. So it's kind of insane. I mean, I don't know how you feel about that, Lindsay, when I sort of say these studies, but it's pretty amazing the links that we are seeing. And I think it opens up so many questions. How does this boom and bust that we see perhaps in the markets, how does that correlate with what's happening inside? What goes up must come down in the markets. Is that a bit like a hormone spike? What goes up must crash, a spike must crash. So it's really, really fascinating to understand more about ourselves and really about our behavior. And I would just add one other thing, which is that for anyone that hears all about this evolutionary biology and thinks, oh God, I don't want to hear more about evolutionary biology and men and women and how different we are, because I can understand that. I think what's even more powerful is how similar we all are, and actually how much hormones and the concepts of love and fear guide our behaviors. So there's even more research that very fascinatingly, Baumgartner et al. In 2008 looked at 49 participants. It put these participants in a functional MRI to scan their brains, and it gave them either oxytocin, which is the love hormone, or a placebo. And those that were given oxytocin, then when they participated in a game of trust where they had to invest, they were much less suspicious. Even if their trust was betrayed, when they played the next round of the game, their trust was back and they were playing as if nothing bad had happened. Whereas those who had been given placebo, their behavior was changed. So I hope that gives a bit of an overview of just quite how powerful our biology can be when it comes to behavior.
Yes, and just that everything to your point, it's not simple. It's inward, it's outward, and I think this is a good time to talk about when we think behavior. I think our society right now is dealing with a lot of stress because of internal, external things going on, and I think it would be interesting to take this behavior talk in that direction because I bet that you deal with this a lot with your clientele. And do you see a lot of clients walk through the door that are struggling with stress and possibly trauma? And are those one of the same?
Yeah, I think this is such a big overlooked factor because actually the thing that unites us all is our survival response, as kind of that balance in a way between survival and transcendence. We all have the same needs. We all, in a sense, have this wheel of needs that are universal, and we are always moving toward, but either towards what we need or away from what we don't need. That's essentially what's happening for all of us. And when it comes to stress, we're all in the same boat here. So we have stress and we can have trauma. So what's the difference? Well, here is how I would describe it. Stress is a moment. Trauma is a memory. And that's really, really important because stress, something short term, it's part of life and it can be good for us, right? I don't know how you feel, Lindsay, but how is it if you do a new challenge every day or you take a small risk? How is that?
It is stress inducing, however, positive
But it's
sometimes,
good, positive,
right?
right?
Yeah.
Because acute stress can have a very positive effect
Mm.
because we are wired that way. We have a nervous system that primes us for fight or flight. And in effect, we can actually reach our peak performance. With a little bit of stress, we can be sharper, we can be clearer, we can be more focused. So at what point does that go wrong? And I think the answer to that is kind of one of two things. Well, first of all, we're supposed to go back to normal, right? There's something called homeostasis. Our systems are supposed to, after the initial threat, whatever it is, public speaking perhaps, after that is over, the idea is that we chill, we take a chill pill, we go and relax. If we are under chronic stress, then the body can actually start to get stuck in a state of producing the hormones, the neurotransmitters that are part of the stress response. So we're thinking about things like noradrenaline and cortisol. So we can be stuck in that as a chronic state. But here's the real big one. If stress is so great that it overwhelms the capability of our nervous system, that is when it becomes a trauma. And I think most of us can understand this if we think about a car accident. Very few people would think that being in a car accident is good for you because that amount of stress is likely to overwhelm the nervous system. That can end up as a shock trauma. And the other time that we can end up getting trauma is actually when we're still developing, when our brains are still developing in childhood. Because when we're born, of course, our brains are not fully developed. We literally wouldn't even fit through the birth canal if they were. So in a way, our brains are clearly are developing. And when we are hit with something very hard, perhaps it's physical abuse, perhaps it's something very, very unsettling, then this can overwhelm the nervous system. And what happens is it leaves an imprint, and it leaves a biological imprint. And this does affect our brains. It affects our brains and it affects the way that we think. So I like to imagine it a bit as if you've thrown a pebble into water. And as that pebble sinks in the water, it doesn't just disturb the column of water, it ripples outwards into everything. And that's essentially what happens when we experience trauma.
Yes, okay. I'm trying so hard not to dumbing it down too much, but I think that this is an interesting conversation. Can we bring it to life with current clients? Because I know on my end that I have a handful that would say that they live in an activated, it's not a choice. Like if they could choose to not feel activated or not feel stressed, they would. That's not a fun place to live. Can you walk us through what would be your conversation with that client walking through the door and next steps and a hope that that doesn't have to look like the rest of their life?
Yeah, I think the first thing is gaining the awareness that we need to question ourselves, that we need to not believe all of our thoughts. This is the big one. Don't believe your thoughts. This is a huge one because when we when we've experienced trauma, when we have that imprint, one of the things that happens is our brains can be rewired. I mean, the amygdala, the fear center, can become overactive. The hippocampus, which is to do with the memory and the learning, can become a bit shrunken. And our prefrontal cortex, our CEO of the brain, which is where we make the more considered choices, the more logical thinking, can that can actually be shut down. We can be more impulsive and less rational. So we can be it's a bit like driving in a high gear. You can be stuck in this high gear where you're stuck in this, I like to call it systems one thinking, right? Where you are thinking fast, it's quite emotional, it's very automatic, and you're doing what you've always done. It's kind of habitual, this is the way it is, this is how I do it, this is how it is. And I think when people are stuck in that, the difficulty is that they're not even open to doing things differently,
Hmm.
to even seeking a new way, to changing the habits that may be keeping them a bit stuck, right? Because that requires systems two thinking. That requires the CEO of the brain to say, "Hang on, guys, let's calm down. Let's just think this one through. Nothing to be panicked about." But until we recognize that that's what's happening, it's a bit like you're trying to do your tax return whilst you're being chased by a lion. You can't make good decisions. And we can see this. Sometimes women come to me in perimenopause and they feel really all over the place. And it can even be like a big leap to even get help. It can even be a really big leap to say, I need help, I need to do something differently. And what I would say to the person who is experiencing that is be curious. Just try to understand what's going on. So this is where, in a way, you asked what the first step would be. The first step would be find out what's happening in your body with the questionnaires, get some tests, actually see what's going on. Because so often we want to jump to the solution. We want to say, okay, should I take this? Should I take this supplement? Should I give up gluten? Should I do this? Should I take HRT? But we haven't even seen what's going on. So that would be my way of looking at it.
No, thank you. I always feel like so awareness is what I'm hearing. And it's interesting because you nailed it. People want, give me the thing, give me the answer, give me the pill. And it's very want to say it's awareness. You need to understand what's going on in your body, right? So the fun part of this takeaway though is there is hope and there is a step-by-step process of if we can become very aware, then we can start to understand who to even start to reach out to. So I can only imagine who starts to walk through your doors is so relieved because they're like, I didn't even know you existed. I didn't even know this was a thing until word of mouth, friend of a friend of a friend. Do you feel like that's how a lot of people walk through your doors in the first place?
Absolutely. It's a lot of
Hmm.
word of mouth and it's a lot of, and I think that can be great, right? Because we are so influenced by our tribe, by the people that we are with. And of course I think it's great to share our experiences with another. I mean, that doesn't mean that what's right for one person is right for you, but it means that, when people share their experiences, sometimes you can recognize yourself in parts of them. And I think it's the most beautiful thing, really, if we can just share our experiences unfiltered as they are, how it is for us, and if we can receive that, I think that's a very, very powerful thing. And I think with the functional medicine way of seeing things, is you do get the answer, right? It does end up being, okay, this is what you need to do, or this we're going to get there. We're going to get to the solutions.
Yes.
But I think it's not just the awareness and that's it. But I think it is often a case of doing more than one thing. It doesn't have to just be take this and that's it. The power is really actually when we start to feel better, we are open and we are capable of making many, many more changes. So I think that's really the process. New pathways open up. Things that weren't possible become possible. That's what happens.
I 100% agree. And I think it's important to highlight that integrative medicine, when we go more of the holistic route, it's very much whole body. And so that's why it is a step by step, because once the awareness comes, there's normally a first, let's look at this, and then we move on to this. And I just wanted to point out that if an individual were to go into their normal primary doctor or possibly their gynecologist, they might be offered antidepressant or they might be offered anti-anxiety type medication where I feel like, do you do more of let's talk root cause and let's see if that's necessary down the road first? Like, where does, when those conversations come up, where does your brain go?
Yeah, I mean, I think the main difference is that with the mainstream system, it's very binary. It's a bit like you're either in menopause or you're not. And if you're in menopause, you can have some HRT, and if you're not, well, take an antidepressant or a sleeping tablet. But actually, what happens is that our hormones are, that we have hormones throughout our lives. It's a journey, and our hormones decline with time. They decline at different rates. So we can be in our 40s, our hormones can start to decline and it can get out of balance. We may have high levels of some hormones, low levels of others. And that imbalance can start to bring the creeping on of symptoms. Okay, so it could be, first of all, oh, I'm getting worse PMS. Oh, my periods are heavier. Oh, the gap between my periods has changed. Oh, wow, I'm finding now I can't shift weight. Oh, I'm getting headaches. And and in all of that time, the mainstream system might still be looking at that and saying, oh, well, you're still having periods, you're not menopausal, that's it, take an antidepressant. But the reality is that it is hormonal. It's just kind of at the level of dysfunctions and imbalances. So that's where our clinic would come in and we would take a much more holistic approach. We would test hormones and we would treat that person with just what they need. So if it's a hormonal imbalance, you're correcting the hormonal imbalance with bioidentical hormones, nutrition, supplements. That's, I think, very, very empowering for people because it treats all the symptoms, okay? It's not just the heavy periods, it's also helps the fatigue, it helps the insomnia, it treats everything because it's getting to actually what the problem was. So I think it's about a lens in a way and how wide we look at things.
Right. Thank you. Beautifully said. Yes. I wanted to, as I was looking at your website, notice that you have this beautiful multidisciplinary team as well. Like you have a therapist on staff, you have a nutritionist, there's physicians. Can we go into a little bit more of the psychology component, emotional factors that affect everything? We can go back to the stress or the trauma, or we can keep moving on. Just like, what do you notice needs attention from an emotional standpoint?
Hmm. Yeah. Well, I think the first thing is to recognize how joined up it all is.
Mhm.
Because, I mean, I started off by speaking out a bit about trauma, but what I didn't say was that this is connected to everything. And it's not just trauma, it can work the other way as well. So, physical problems, unhappy gut, can affect our mental health. Our mental health can affect our gut. So, the way that works is that we have a hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. Okay, that's the communication between the brain and the adrenal glands, which produce our stress hormones, primarily our fight or flight, our survival hormones. But that also filters and ripples out to many other impacts on the body. So, to give you an example, when we mentioned stress, which I think is a big thing for many people, we're not just talking about stressful life events. We're talking about an accumulation of stressors, factors, whether that be, yeah, you're having problems in your relationship, and you're perimenopausal, and you've been busy at work, so your diet's not been great, and actually you've only been sleeping 5 hours a night. And that accumulation of stresses, that accumulation of factors can put us into this maladaptive response, whereby rather than having the acute fight or flight when one more bad thing happens, we kind of get stuck in the maladaptation because the body is already has this other stuff on its load, and so the cortisol levels don't go back to normal, and the ripple out effect that that has on the body is that it affects everything. It affects our gut, it affects the bacteria in the gut, it affects how much the lining of the gut allows bacterial toxins to seep into the bloodstream, how much inflammation happens in the body. It can even affect our sex hormones. We can even lose our periods because of stress. It can affect our autoimmune risk because actually we can get switched on to this inflammatory state whereby our body starts attacking itself. You know, suddenly someone starts to get antibodies against their thyroid gland. So we can start off on this spiral. And it's bi-directional, right? It does also work the other way. I mean, if we have a poor diet, if we're eating the wrong things, we're getting bloating, digestive issues, you feel miserable and you feel depressed. In fact, they found that 1/3 of depression is as responsive to anti-inflammatories as it is antidepressants. So, you know, this is a huge, huge link. So I think where functional medicine is coming in is it's recognizing that our emotions and our biology are so intertwined and that it really is worth looking at all of it together and kind of adding up the factors to see if that is suiting the system or if it's starting to overload it.
Oh, this is so good because I feel like you just nailed down pretty much everyone who'd be listening to this podcast right now. I feel like that accumulation word really resonated because it's rarely just one thing. It really is all the little things from kids to even the grandparents, who are now watching some of the kids and still working and the relationship issues. And I think that a lot of individuals don't understand that even their feeling as stressed as their internal insides could feel the stress. Sometimes we think we're fine or it's okay. That whole I'm fine, are we fine? I don't know. Like your insides might be telling you something different. So I
Yeah,
appreciate
and it's exactly that, you know, and I, but then, and then also, because you were asked about the psychology, when it comes to the psychology, I feel like the most important part is the difference between a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. And a fixed mindset is when we tend to believe that this is how it is, this is the way things are, some things are innate, it's just the way I am, and nothing can be done about it. And a growth mindset is like, actually, everything is plastic, everything can change, someone who sees a challenge as an opportunity. And functional medicine very much backs up the growth mindset because we see in functional medicine how much plasticity there is. We see this genetically, how actually lifestyle is the thing that either switches on or switches off certain predispositions. So functional medicine is very dynamic, it's all about growth. And I think this is really, really important for psychology because I think that if we're in a fixed mindset, we limit ourselves and we can limit those around us.
Yes, agreed. Okay, our kids even nowadays in school learn about fixed versus growth mindsets, which I'm impressed and I'm so glad that it's in the system. So I've known this topic and then I've known, the integrative, the holistic topic. I've never heard them meshed together that actually like is part of or feeds this integrative system. So very cool. And the growth mindset and just the malleable, to your point, we can change, our mind can change. We actually don't have to feel stuck. The brain piece of all of this is the piece, and I don't know if you agree, but with clients, when we can get them to understand that piece is so important that if we don't change that piece, then the nutrition and the fitness piece, we can keep battling and knocking at that door. And we're going to forever be stuck until we jump over and also work on our brain space. And so if you could just again tie all of that together and what you've seen out of clients and the individuals who are still maybe not having, maybe they're not open to doing the brain work or they don't believe in it. Like how do we keep pulling them on board?
I think it's about understanding what is happening inside us, and I think it comes back to this idea that we like to think that we are rational beings who occasionally feel, and actually we are more likely emotional beings that occasionally think. It really is. There is so much driving our behavior, and it's in a sense we have needs, and we are moving towards those needs. That's a lot of the time that's what's happening. So if we are stuck too much in one way of thinking, we don't tend to get results because it works for a while and then something gives. But I think that when we really, really understand the whole picture, when we understand how many factors can influence each other, the bidirectional relationship between our thoughts and our diet and our hormones and the amount of rest that we're getting, our circadian rhythms, right? How much we are managing to detoxify all of the toxins that we come into contact with every day. When we recognize that the all these things affect our choices, affect our behaviors, I think we suddenly realize, well, actually, there's quite a lot of potential to also improve things. And how do I start to feel better? How do I start to not just follow the information and the incentive, that I've been told if I do this, I get this incentive. This is the information, I must do this. And if I do it, I will get the incentive. That kind of, it can get one so far, but doesn't always work because we may not have addressed the underlying biology, the underlying feelings, emotions, drivers that are keeping us stuck in behaviors that stop us doing what we actually want to be doing. And I think the best way I can describe that shift is shifting from a different way of thinking. It really is shifting out of a very automatic, repetitive, not very considered way of thinking into taking a breath and slipping into that systems two thinking and saying, okay, what is actually going on here? Going a bit deeper. So I think that's the biggest change that people need to make.
And I hope that our listeners keep hearing this out of you because as we were talking about, you're really good about bringing us back to it's not one system, it's not one thing, it's not just sleep, it's not just food, it's not just fitness, it's not just behavior, it's all of it. And we have to look at them as a package instead of, I think, especially over here. I don't know if you notice it as much in London, but I definitely think over here we're a little bit more systems oriented and we want to attack one thing at a time versus bringing it all together. And you kind of take that perfect storm and work it that way versus picking it apart, which I love it. And we're getting there, I think. But what am I not asking you that you hope our listeners hear out of you today? If they took nothing else away, what's like this one nugget that you're like, listen to me?
I think you've said it really. I think it's just to stay curious about what is going on, and from a health perspective, it is that if we stay curious and we really investigate what's going on, the solution may be many things. It's not just take hormones, just work on diet. It can be many, many things, and it's really about finding exactly what you need at that time. And I think this has a huge impact on our lives because we've had people who've come in who've said, four guys down the pub, all of them are going through the divorce. What's one thing they have in common? And the one thing they have in common is that their wives are all in menopause. So we can go through physical changes. We can be having something physically going on and it's seeping out and affecting all of our life. And it can be so difficult to know what is what. And I think just having the time and space to look a bit holistically and look at all of these factors all together really does change people's lives. It does make a difference for the outcome of someone's life.
It does. And I asked you from the very beginning, give us hope. And thank you. That was that. There's your hope, listeners. Take it. If everyone is going, oh, I'm loving this, where can I find more of you? Where do you like to direct individuals?
Yeah, so either on Instagram, London Bioidentical Hormones, or at the clinic website. So that is www.londonbioidenticalhormones.com. Have a webinar that people can watch as well, which explains a bit more about how we work. So that might be of interest.
No, thank you for saying that. I continue to ask the listeners to like take some action as you show up. And I love listening to a podcast as well, but I feel like if we don't take that next step and take some notes or journal or go listen to a webinar, we're not taking that next opportunity to implement. And so I love that you have that resource available to go take the next deep dive. And anything else that you can think of, are there any worksheets or little quizzes that you offer that could be helpful as well?
If people they're in the UK and they are wondering if we can help, essentially if they're struggling with symptoms, yes, they're very free to book a discovery call, and we do questionnaires for that. So that can be a good resource. I think there's quite a lot on the website, so you could have a look at the, as I say, the webinar. I've got a free ebook. That book is about the difference between types of hormone replacement, so bioidentical versus synthetic. So that's a good book. And the third thing that we have is a guide, an overall guide to holistic health, which sort of shows the roadmap that I've been talking about today. All of those different domains that we cover, which is nutrition, diet, we look at sleep and circadian rhythms, hormones, detoxification and cellular health, and mindset and nervous system regulation. So I think in a way we've touched on all of those and how much they affect our behaviors and our life. That's kind of what we've covered today. But it's a nice for anyone who is struggling and just wants to get an overview.
Agreed. Overview is the word. We hit a very minimal baseline of everything today. We could literally do a podcast on every topic that you just mentioned. So, for another day, it's been an absolute treat to have you, Dr. Arasu. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Nice to be here.